Hello and welcome, and thanks for joining us in the Continuing the Conversation studio. Continuing the Conversation, or CTC, is an arts and education network founded and organized by alumni from the Arts and Education program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Our goal is to provide spaces for conversations that are important to advancing the work in the arts and education sector, and to get as many people as we can across sectors engaged in those conversations. You can join in today by commenting on our website, aieconversation.org, or by tweeting with the hashtag #AChat. I am Eliza Greenberg, a co-chair of CTC and a 2007 alum of the AIE program, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today. CTC is preparing for our next conference, Circle Up, which will happen May 6th through 8th at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. During the conference, participants will follow conversation threads that address different topics important to the field of arts education. Our guest today is one of 5 thread leaders who will be leading the conversation in May. Today we welcome Angie Tillges, who will be leading our Strengthening Communities thread, and we will be discussing the question, who can we align with to create quality programming and impact, and how can we share and collaborate together with competitive resources? So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Steve Seidel to get us started.
Thank you, Eliza. And Angie, it's great to have you here. You and I have not had a chance to talk for quite some time, so I'm delighted that we get a chance to talk today.
Likewise.
And it's great that that we get to do this, and that other folks are checking in and listening, so welcome to everybody. Eliza set us up and shared a little bit about the content focus for today's conversation. We're going to talk about this thread for the conference called Strengthening Communities, and I'm just going to repeat the 2 framing questions. Who can we align with to create quality programming and impact? And how can we share and collaborate together with competitive resources? So for me, the whole notion of strengthening communities is a really interesting one. I mean, you know, what communities are we talking about? Who are we talking about becoming stronger? And I think there are lots of questions that we need to open up about that. You know, is there an assumption that something isn't strong, that something needs to be strengthened on one level? I look at all of the communities that I'm a part of and have ever been a part of, and they all needed to be strengthened. But I also am very sensitive to the kinds of deficit language that has been so pervasive and really powerful in a negative way in the work that many of us in arts education and other sectors of the society as well have been involved in because of the assumptions that they make about different kinds of communities. So there's a lot to be thinking about and noticing about that language. But in terms of the questions that we have, the framing that makes some sense to me and has always been felt true to me, is that any kinds of significant purposes that we hold for our work in arts education and education more broadly, in the public sector more broadly, any of the kinds of goals that we have are very complex and require a wide range of people coming together to try to achieve those purposes. And I think that the crucial question that we're trying to get at here is what makes that coming together sometimes really work, and what makes that coming together sometimes not work well at all. And we have abundant examples of partnerships that haven't really achieved their goals. We have fewer, frankly, examples of partnerships that have been what we would call the kind of success that we would all be looking for, everybody involved. So there's a lot of work. For me, this connects to our conversations about quality that are happening all over the country that I think are really important, that touch on questions of purpose and questions of value. But today we're really focused on how do we figure out what's likely to be a good partnership. So, and it's great to have Angie with us, because Angie has for years now in various settings been working in exceptionally rich and complex partnerships. So Angie, I'm going to hand it over to you. I think it would be great, before we dig in further, for you to just help us understand a little bit about your work, about what partnership has meant in Chicago, some of the issues that you've seen, and so on.
Great. Well, I'm really thrilled to be here and excited to be a thread leader on this specific topic. I come from my time in Chicago, at least. I've been working in the field of arts and education, really as a public artist and an educator of public space. And for the better part of a decade, did that work with Redmoon Theater, which is a highly collaborative spectacle arts company here in the city of Chicago, where I led the community and education programs. And then currently I'm doing this work with the Chicago Park District, where I sit as a senior program specialist in the Culture, Arts, and Nature department. And in this new position, my role is cultural partnerships and special projects. And so it's thinking very deeply about how to thread together relationships across similarities, across differences, all over the city.
Great, great. So I think this may be as far as we go in the conversation today, but I'd like to start on thinking about the very early work of alliance and partnership building. So whether the initiative has come from the city, whether the initiative has come from a neighborhood, a community group, from an arts group, from a funder often, some call goes out that starts to bring people together and try to figure out, should we work together? Can we work together well? Or is this actually a situation in which we should be saying, this may not be the right kind of partnership at this time.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when in your experience, what are the things that you're really looking for? What do you think are the conversations that need to happen? What starts to build a solid foundation for a partnership moving forward?
Sure. In what I've learned through my work, it's really the seed of it all is intentionality. It's intentionality first and foremost with the person who brings forth the idea of partnership, be that an individual artist or a classroom or a funder or you name it. But the intentionality, what are they really looking to achieve? And then the intentionality in which they go out and meet the partners that they want to work with. I'm a firm believer in lots of early work leading into partnership. It's not something that we always have the luxury of time on our side, and especially getting together across many different organizations. Scheduling can be very difficult, but it's the essential work, and it really does tell you in those initial meetings who's ready to play and who's not. You can kind of get the flavor of how the partnership will go in those really early conversations. And so what I've found is that I tend to put more labor into that work to really understand what the potential of a partnership moving forward.
Angie, in my experience, you can have potential partners or a group of people coming together around the table who actually share some sense of purpose, but maybe it's hard to tell how deeply aligned they really are. And there may also be, in the nature of the organizations represented or the groups that are represented, some really different values that, so just on the, like in a really broad way, you know, one group may work fast and another group may work really slow.
Mm-hmm.
Say, you know what, we take time. This is not a 3-month project, it's a 3-year project.
Yeah.
So in your experience, you know, which alignments really make a difference, you know, that you would say this isn't a good connection?
Sure.
Which ones don't?
You know, I may be alone in this, but I feel like the partnerships where your alignments are a little bit off are actually the richer ones to be had, right? And so one of the things that I'm always looking for in that is figuring out what I might be or my organization might be bringing in terms of expertise. What am I really bringing to the table, and what don't I have, right? And then looking across the table to say, does that partner complement in their expertise? Are they bringing something that I value but don't already have? Or, you know, sometimes the value isn't exactly shared, but there's some other component. So you have to sort of look at, you know, the whole landscape of values and intentions and goals. But I think those slightly misaligned relationships can build kind of a wider community, let's say. And so that's a real interest to me. But it takes a fair amount of work, both up front for the individual and then whomever you're partnering with, to really sit down and think through, what am I bringing to the table? Why should I bring that to this table? And I think that's in part those early conversations, what you really want to get at.
So 2 things come up for me when you talk about that, and I totally appreciate what you're saying about the differences that enrich and strengthen the partnership. Let's start with. I'm going to just name the 2 things. We'll start with one. The first is, as arts educators, much, though not all of our work is with young people. And in so many situations, they're really not at the table when partnerships are coming together, when projects are being designed. And I wonder if you've had experience. But they're clearly, if you don't have the partnership of the young people themselves, whether they're 5 or 10 or 15 or 25, if you don't have their partnership, what's the nature of the partnership?
Sure.
So I wonder if you could talk about, you know, about that, and experiences that you've had, ways that you've found to bring youth voice into early dialogue.
Yeah, you know, it's true. It's really difficult for a multitude of reasons that perhaps those young people are not at the table at the early conversation. So if we look at an example, which would be, say, a partnership between a school classroom and a few other players, an arts organization, maybe a social service organization, you have a few groups in the mix. Depending on when that partnership originates, you don't even know if the children might not even be around yet, right? And so really what I've done in the past, and not all the time because it's very difficult to do, but you start with the first layer of those key sort of institutional partners, your core partners, and then you look at a second sphere of partnerships. Who are the other people who they could be the students who you'll be working with? They could be the parents and community members who will ultimately be impacted by some product or outcome of the work that you've done together. And you want to look at other ways to invite these next layers of partnership into the conversation. So with youth and with students, it's often building it into the curriculum in those first few classes, knowing that we're not going to be able to get to it ahead of time, but we know that we need their buy-in, their authorship, and really their opinions to see where the project and partnership might want to go. And so building into the early parts of the curriculum, the same work, the same partnership building work that you've been doing with your core partners is a really successful way at beginning to get at that. I don't think it fully addresses it, and it would be beautiful if there could be some more scenarios where young people are sitting directly at that table in the first round of conversation.
Yeah, but I think you raise a really important set of questions about how fully developed a plan or a design or even an articulation of purposes is before the people who are going to directly engage, children in particular, but also often parents and other members of the community where those young people live. How, you know, if everything's been worked out in advance and then the plan is to go in and do it, that sends a huge set of messages that that maybe in fact really are counterproductive and run counter to the very values that are at the espoused core of the program or the partnership.
Yeah.
So how one keeps things open, even as you're coming together and trying to work out the first phases of a design, is really important. Let me just throw out another, because I know we have somewhat limited time. In a lot of situations, money is the driver. Money is what's brought people to the table. Could come from the city, the municipality. It could come from a funder, a philanthropic organization. Might come from the feds, or at least the possibility of getting it through a request for proposals, etc. When people are coming around the table and that's what's brought them, does that raise a set of questions for you? And how do you walk in the room then? And what are you looking for? What are you listening to? And so on.
Yeah, absolutely it does. I mean, I think, and I want to jump back just a hair to the last sort of question that you opened up, where I think, you know, in part that openness that you're talking about is, you know, something that I'm toying with of, you know, there's partnerships that are sort of, I would say they're technical, or they're kind of about interactions. I give you something and you give me something back, right? And then there's partnerships that, for lack of the better words, you would call more authentic, and it's sort of like we have some agreed stake in what we're trying to do, but we don't really know where it's going to go. And I don't know how you're going to change over the course of the partnership, and you don't know how I will change over the course of the partnership. But the work of the partnership then is to stay in this space of being open and stay in the dialogue and really listening to one another to understand what that partnership should really, how that partnership should move and behave and become.
Angie,
yeah.
Are you about to move on? Or
sure.
Can I say
you can stop me.
Yeah, I just want to, I mean, what you were just saying is a really very aligned with the findings that came from a study that we did. Now it's got to be, I don't know, almost 20 years ago at Project Zero, called Art Survive, which was about partnerships. And probably, for me at least, the key finding from that study was that partnerships that lasted over sort of longer than their initial expected lifespan were partnerships in which all of the partners essentially changed over time. They questioned things about themselves. The phrase that I remember from that study was listen, learn, and change. That every partner had to be ready to do that, and that often meant that the initial sort of goals and mission of the organizations were that the partners had to find a higher mission, you know, sort of an articulation of purposes that encompassed all of them. And then each of the partners had to, in a sense, agree to be willing to change.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, your language makes great sense in relation to that.
Yeah. And, you know, I want to point out, too, like when I say sort of that the technical or kind of interaction-based partnership, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I think one of the things that we struggle with, I'll speak for the arts field, programmers, teachers, et cetera, is that we, you know, and producers especially, it's just like we want to say that a partnership is sometimes more than it is. And that can be really troubling to me because I think you can see it in the work. You can see the difference between, for example, a youth-authored theater presentation and something that has clearly been kind of, you know, the youth have done some work, but then a whole other group of people have taken it over and rewritten it. That's fine. It just, you know, the work of being clear about what's really going on in partnership is something that I think is, you know, really important and kind of worth exploring, and something that I hope that we get to talk about even more when we get together this May. I would say to the second question that you were bringing up about resources and when dollars are at the table, which they often are, I think it sort of makes me even more alert. It's a difficult one. I can say from the position of being a leader of programs, for example, at Redmoon, like the dollars matter, and we do need the dollars in order to do the work. The difficult work in that position is knowing when the alignment isn't there, even if the dollars are there, it is not worth doing the work. And being sort of clear enough in yourself and clear enough with the partner that if you don't have that shared goal, it is probably not the right time to partner. And that, I think, is another thing that's very difficult to do, but saying no is okay.
Yeah. I mean, saying no, I think, is really important. I mean, when I was working at Project Zero, I often felt that you could tell as much or more about our identity as an organization by the things we didn't choose to pursue as by the things that we did. So when we said no, said as much about us as when we said yes.
Yes, it's the same dialogue as, you know, getting off mission, right? That you talk a lot about this in the world of leadership and not-for-profits, is, you know, being off mission. And what it does is it starts to make everything unclear for those who are working inside of an organization, as well as the audience of that organization. It starts to make things a bit murky in a way that can be counterproductive and make, you know, yourself a bit more confusing to the public if you start to stray off.
Yeah, but it's an interesting problem, because I'm just going to take us back to where we were a minute ago about changing, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I've long had this ambivalent relationship with mission, right? It's like you have to have it. You need to know what your purposes are. You need to hold to them. You also need to be growing and changing and figuring out, you know, new understandings of the world and the work that you do and its possibilities, and evolving. Mm-hmm. And so lots of interesting tensions there. And if in any partnership, if you multiply that kind of evolution going on, the partners are not static, and they shouldn't be static. Mm-hmm. So you start to multiply all these moving parts, and it's another reason why you start to see the complexity of partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you know, in the spirit of change, I do think it's also the work of individuals and organizations, or it could even, if you're a classroom teacher, you're just like, what are your intentions in your work? And just naming those, and it might be something, that work might need to be done on an annual basis, it might need to be done every 5 years, but it's very helpful. It's very helpful because, you know, the field can get far too big too quickly if you don't have those things to kind of more back to. And, you know, I think about it, having these points of definition have been very helpful to me in just managing the capacity for myself as an artist or for myself as a program manager. I need to have some edges to the work. Otherwise, I'm often spilling over the edges in terms of my own personal capacity. And so it's valuable for a number of different reasons.
Do you feel like you've used or developed or know people who have created protocols for good conversation about intentions across potential partners?
Yeah, I mean, I think we began this work, this was when I was with Redmoon. We were granted some money from EMC Arts to do, it was an innovation lab grant, and the grant was really for an organization to take on a big kind of structural issue question and to get together with a few other people, retreat about it, think about it, move around it. And so we chose to take the conversation of what, I think for many of us there who had been there for a long time, we had sort of this recipe of how we collaborate and how we enter collaboration, but had been very squishy around whether or not we were going to pin down and name what that practice really was. And so I think through, again, talking about funding, the funding was the opportunity to sit not only as a core group of collaborators within an organization, but to bring along some partners. So we brought a variety of partners along with us to this retreat. Some folks from Cure Violence, which is formerly Ceasefire, an anti-violence organization here in Chicago, and some partners from Family Focus, which is a social service organization, as well as, interestingly, someone from the Chicago Park District, because we often would make work in public space, often on park land. And so that was, I don't know that we got to the core, we got to the core of what worked for us. We were able, with those partners and through sort of carefully hashing out a lot of different things, we're able to kind of write up how do we enter partnership and how does it work and how does it feel on the receiving end, right? We're often the ones who would come to communities with the intention, with the idea. And so how does that really feel to be entering into this world with us? Mostly we're working with non-artists when we partner, and so that was a really informative thing. And I'm careful to say what those tenets are, in part because I think the work to be done is unique to the situation. So it's unique to what a classroom teacher might do when they're partnering with, say, an arts organization, or it's unique to a museum curator when they're partnering with children from a neighborhood. So, but I do believe that that's an essential part of the work, and I think that there's probably a few things that across lots of different partnerships we would find similarities.
Great, great. Okay, well, we have maxed our time, but I don't think we've maxed the topic. There's clearly lots more to think about, but I appreciate. I totally appreciate, Angie, your bringing the years of, the sort of the quiet early work of trying to figure out how people can come together to do work that matters to everyone, and hopefully is good for everyone, and sharing that experience with us today. I'm excited about the conference in May. I'm thrilled that you'll be with us and that we're going to get to dig much more deeply into this set of questions. So with that, Angie, thank you. And I'm going to hand it back to Aliza, and she can take us out.
Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us today, Angie. To all who are watching, be sure to head over to aieconversation.org and add your comments and continue the conversation with us and spread the word about our conversations. We'll be back in the studio in January with another one of our conference thread leaders, and we hope you'll circle up with us in May at the conference. Thank you.